Ethan Walker opened his eyes before his alarm could buzz. At 6:15 a.m. sharp, soft gray light seeped in through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, casting long shadows over marble floors and sleek, cold furniture. Outside, the New York skyline stretched into a quiet fog. It was the kind of view people dreamed of, but for Ethan, it felt more like a framed photograph than a real life. He swung his legs out of bed and sat still for a moment, rubbing his temples. 30 years old, worth over $3 billion, and yet not a single soul waiting for him in the silence of this sprawling 7,000-square-foot apartment. His parents were long gone, his only sister hadn't spoken to him in years, and any friendships he once had drowned under years of meetings, deals, and headlines. By 6:30, he was on the treadmill, running not because he enjoyed it, but because it filled time. One foot in front of the other. He watched the digital readout climb, 6.5 miles per hour, incline 3.5. His mind wandered. Always moving, never arriving, he thought. The robotic voice of the smart assistant interrupted. "Good morning, Mr. Walker. Breakfast is served. Your schedule has been updated." "Thank you, Mrs. Harris," he called out, barely remembering the name of the housekeeper who'd worked for him over a year. He hardly saw her. She arrived early, left before dark, and ran the household like a well-oiled machine. A widow from Queens, she reminded him vaguely of the kind woman who used to run the school cafeteria when he was a boy, strict but kind, invisible unless something went wrong. He sat at a 12-foot-long dining table, alone, as always. A perfectly poached egg, 2 slices of whole grain toast, and a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice were arranged with Michelin-level precision. He flipped through reports on a tablet while chewing mechanically. Stock market trends. Asian expansion plans. Press releases for the upcoming charity gala. Numbers on a screen that meant little to him anymore. His assistant, Helen, called promptly at 8 a.m. board meeting at 9, lunch with the Blackstone Group at noon, then the Forbes interview at 3. "Do you still plan to attend the gala tonight at the Met?" "I'll think about it," Ethan replied without emotion. "Any word from your sister?" he asked, as he always did. "No, sir. Of course not." Claire had walked away from the family name and fortune 2 years ago after a bitter fight over their father's will. Ethan hadn't heard from her since. Dressed in a $5,000 Italian suit, he stepped into the elevator that whisked him 60 floors down in silence. His driver, Mike, stood beside the Bentley with the door already open. "Good morning, Mr. Walker." Ethan nodded. Morning. Another day had begun, but deep down, he knew something had to change. Something big. Something real. It was just past 6:45 p.m. when Ethan Walker stepped out of his building onto the sidewalk. For the first time in months, he dismissed his driver, pulled on a worn ball cap, and walked aimlessly into the evening mist. No tailored agenda. No security detail. Just a man in a designer coat blending into the anonymous crowd on 5th Avenue. 3 blocks from home, the smell of fresh bread stopped him. It drifted from an old bakery tucked between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop, places he'd passed for years but never noticed. The sign above the shop read Gordon's Bakery, its letters faded and chipped like the memory of another era. A small brass bell jingled as he opened the door. Inside, the warmth hit him like a childhood memory. Wooden shelves lined with golden loaves, glass cases filled with pies and cookies, and a few small tables where folks sat quietly with coffee cups or newspapers. Behind the counter stood a man in his 60s, wearing a white apron dusted in flour. "Evening," he said with a nod. "Help you with something?" Ethan hesitated, then smiled. A coffee and, what do you recommend? Roast beef on rye solid. Baked it myself this morning. I'll take it. The coffee came in a ceramic mug, not a to-go cup. No soy foam. No imported beans. Just strong, hot, no-nonsense coffee. The sandwich was simple and hearty, served on a chipped plate with a pickle spear on the side. You're not from around here, the baker said casually, wiping his hands on a dish towel. I used to be, Ethan replied, though it wasn't entirely true. He'd grown up in Connecticut and gone to prep school in Vermont. New York had always been business, not belonging. I'm Gordon, the man said. Been running this place 30 years. Ethan, he said simply. They chatted a bit about the weather, the Yankees' chances next season, and how the city was changing. It felt human. Honest. No corporate jargon. No headlines. As Ethan paid, pulling a thick black wallet from his coat, he thanked Gordon and stepped back into the night. What he didn't realize was that the wallet, heavy with $100 bills and sleek credit cards, slipped from his pocket as the door closed behind him. 20 minutes later, two small figures approached the bakery. Emma, just 5, and her 3-year-old brother Jack, walked hand in hand over the cracked pavement. Their socks were damp from the sidewalk. They had no coats, only layers of mismatched clothes and the wide-eyed look of kids who'd learned to stay invisible. Jack's stomach growled loudly. I know, Emma whispered. Let's see if Mr. Gordon has anything left. That's when Jack spotted the wallet. Emma, look. She bent down, picking up the leather case with trembling fingers. Inside was more money than they'd ever seen. Her heart pounded. The smell of bread filled the air. But instead of running, Emma clutched the wallet to her chest and made a decision that would change all of their lives. Emma Miller had been taught to do the right thing, even when it hurt. Her mother, before she passed, used to say, "What matters most, sweetheart, is not what you have, but who you are when no one's looking." Now, standing in the cold outside Gordon's bakery, clutching a wallet that could change their lives, Emma remembered those words. She opened it slowly. The leather was smooth and expensive, and the inside shimmered with gold-accented credit cards and neatly stacked $100 bills. She had never seen so much money in one place, not on TV, not in books, not even in dreams. Jack whimpered beside her, his face pale and his little hands icy. I'm hungry, Emma. I know, she whispered, kneeling to his level. Her fingers shook from both the cold and the weight of the decision she faced. Inside her oversized coat, once her mom's, she found a crumpled piece of paper and a stub of a red crayon. She'd picked up both weeks ago from a schoolyard trash can, hoping someday she'd have a reason to write something important. This felt important. Using the bakery's front step as her desk, Emma wrote carefully, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. I'm sorry. My brother is hungry, so I took one bill to buy bread. I promise I'll pay you back. Emma. She folded the note with great care, placing it on top of the money in the wallet. Then, trembling, she pulled out the smallest bill she could find, a single $20. Holding it tight in one hand and the wallet in the other, she led Jack through the bakery door. The bell jingled softly. Gordon, who was sweeping behind the counter, looked up and smiled warmly. Emma. Jack. I was hoping you'd stop by tonight. She walked up and placed the wallet gently on the counter, along with the $20. We found this outside, she said quietly. It has a lot of money inside. I only took one bill. I had to feed Jack. But I left a note. I'll pay it back. Gordon, stunned, opened the wallet and saw the note resting on top. He read it once, then again, his hand covering his mouth. His eyes glistened. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice husky, "you didn't have to pay me for the bread." "I want to," Emma replied firmly, holding out the bill. "That way, it's not stealing." The pride in her voice was unmistakable, pride far greater than any a child her age should need to carry. Gordon nodded slowly and handed her a paper sack filled with 2 fresh loaves and a couple of oatmeal cookies he'd tucked in on purpose. "Keep the change," he said gently. As the siblings walked out into the night, arms wrapped around each other and the warm bread, Gordon stood in silence. The wallet still in his hands, the note still resting atop the bills. He had no doubt in his heart, whoever lost this wallet needed to know what a little girl named Emma had done. It was nearly 11 p.m. when Ethan Walker returned to his penthouse and realized his wallet was missing. He stood in the foyer, patting his coat pockets, checking the kitchen counter, the side table, even the floor near the front door. Nothing. Panic flickered, not for the cash, which he barely noticed anymore, but for the hassle of replacing IDs, bank cards, access passes. His head throbbed at the thought of all the phone calls he'd need to make. Then it hit him, the bakery. He must have slipped it into his inner coat pocket in a hurry. Maybe it hadn't gone all the way in. That night, sleep was a stranger. Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, more restless than he'd felt in years. There was something about that simple moment at Gordon's, the hot sandwich, the casual conversation, the feeling of being just another customer, that lingered like the scent of fresh bread. At dawn, he dressed quickly, skipping his usual custom-tailored routine. No driver, no assistant. Just Ethan, his car keys, and a hopeful urgency he didn't fully understand. The bakery door chimed at 7:15 a.m. Gordon looked up from behind the counter, arranging cinnamon rolls. "Well, good morning, Mr. Walker," the old baker said with a knowing smile. Ethan blinked. "You remembered my name?" "It was on your driver's license," Gordon replied, reaching under the counter. "And on your corporate cards. This belonged to you?" He placed the black leather wallet on the counter like it was a sacred object. Ethan opened it, half expecting to find it empty. But everything was there: cash, cards, IDs, and something more. A folded note. He picked it up carefully. It was written in red crayon, in uneven, careful letters. "I'm sorry. My brother is hungry, so I took 1 bill to buy bread. I promise I'll pay you back. Emma." Ethan read it again. And again. His throat tightened. "She left it," Gordon said softly. "Her name's Emma. She came in last night with her little brother, Jack. They couldn't have been more than 5 and 3. Said they found your wallet outside." She was trembling, Mr. Walker. Cold, hungry. But she still brought it back. "She only took a single $20? Ethan asked, still staring at the note. Gordon nodded. "And she insisted on paying for the bread." Ethan leaned on the counter, heart pounding for reasons he couldn't explain. "Where are they now?" "I don't know," Gordon admitted. "They come by every few nights. I think they sleep wherever they can find shelter. I've never seen an adult with them." Ethan stood silent for a moment, the noise of the city starting to filter in behind him. "Please," he said finally, "if they come back, call me. Anytime. Day or night." He left his personal cell number on a notepad and walked out into the cool morning air, clutching the note like it was worth more than all the cash in the wallet. Because somehow, it was. Over the next 3 days, Ethan Walker abandoned his usual life. He didn't step foot in the boardroom. He skipped the high-stakes calls. He didn't even return messages from Helen, his usually unflappable assistant who had begun leaving voicemails filled with quiet panic. Instead, he roamed the streets of the East Side with a purpose that surprised even him. In his wallet, tucked behind his driver's license, was Emma's note, the little red crayon message he read every night like a prayer. He retraced every block near Gordon's bakery, talking to shopkeepers, checking alleys, asking questions. He even commissioned a sketch artist to create a soft drawing of Emma and Jack based on Gordon's memory. It was a long shot, but he carried it in his coat pocket, showing it to anyone who might help. One rainy afternoon, he found himself under an overpass where a handful of people had set up makeshift shelters with plastic tarps, cardboard, and threadbare blankets. It was a part of the city he'd only ever seen through tinted car windows, until now. "Excuse me," he said to an older woman wrapped in 3 coats, sitting near a rusted barrel with a small flame. She looked up with wary eyes. "I'm looking for 2 kids," Ethan said, holding out the sketch. "Emma and Jack. The girl's 5. The boy's about 3. The woman studied the drawing carefully, her fingers trembling from cold. Then she nodded slowly. "I've seen him. Sweet little things. She don't talk much, but she looks after her brother like a little mama hen. Brave, that one. When did you see them last?" Ethan asked, leaning in. "A day or 2 ago, maybe more. They don't stay long. She's always scared someone will take the boy." Ethan's heart twisted. "Take him?" "Child services," the woman said. "She's afraid they'll be split up." He felt the weight of that fear settle deep in his chest. "Do you know where they go?" "There's an old building a few blocks west," she said, pointing. "Abandoned, but dry. Some of us hole up there in bad weather. Might be worth checking." Ethan thanked her, slipping a few folded bills into her hand. At first, she refused. He pressed gently. "For food. Or warm socks." She nodded, holding his gaze with surprising dignity. "Good luck, mister." That night, Ethan climbed through a broken panel into the abandoned building. The air smelled of mildew and concrete dust. He passed empty rooms until he found one that was different, carefully arranged. A thin mattress lay on the floor, next to a small pile of folded clothes. And taped to the peeling wall, using old duct tape, were children's drawings, stick figures holding hands, one of a woman with angel wings. He stood in silence. They had been here. They were real. And now, more than ever, Ethan Walker knew he wasn't going back to his old life until he found them again. It was just past 10:45 p.m. when Ethan Walker stepped out of a formal charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The tuxedo itched against his skin, and the echo of polite laughter from Manhattan's elite clung to his ears like static. The champagne, the caviar, the $10,008 plate conversations, it all felt so absurd now. He loosened his bow tie, waved off his driver, and decided to walk the final blocks home. A light drizzle had begun, dotting his lapels with tiny dark circles. He didn't mind. For once, the cold air helped him think. As he passed a shuttered pharmacy on a dimly lit side street, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Under a metal awning, 2 small shapes huddled together on flattened cardboard boxes. One of them, a little girl, had her arms wrapped tightly around a smaller boy, trying to shield him from the chill. Ethan stopped. "Emma," he called gently, afraid to frighten them. The girl's head snapped up. Her face was pale and dirty, eyes wide with fear. She tightened her hold on the boy, who was coughing, a deep, rasping sound that made Ethan's stomach twist. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice small but firm. "My name is Ethan Walker," he said softly. "I've been looking for you. For both of you." Emma didn't move. She looked him up and down, his expensive shoes, his slick coat, his two clean hands. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "How do you know our names?" "You found my wallet," he said, taking it slowly from his pocket, along with the note. This meant more to me than you could ever know." Emma stared, frozen. "I'm not here to hurt you or take you away," Ethan added, crouching down a few feet from them. "I just want to help." Jack let out another harsh cough and leaned limply against his sister. She blinked back tears. "He needs a doctor," Ethan said quietly. "I can take you to a clinic. A private one, no police, no child services. I promise." Emma hesitated, eyes darting between Ethan and her brother. Then, with a courage no child should ever need, she whispered, "If you try to separate us, we'll run." "I won't," Ethan said firmly. "You have my word." With her nod, he moved closer and gently scooped Jack into his arms. The little boy was light, too light, and burning with fever. Ethan took off his coat and wrapped it around Jack as they hurried to the street to hail a cab. Emma sat beside him in the back seat, rigid with worry, her fingers laced tightly in her brother's sleeve. At the private clinic, a kind-faced doctor named Patterson met them at the door, thanks to Ethan's late-night call. Within minutes, Jack was under warm lights, breathing through a nebulizer, a soft blanket wrapped around him. Ethan glanced at Emma. She was sitting quietly, watching every move, her small hands clenched in her lap. "You did the right thing," he told her. She looked up and whispered, "I just want him to be okay." And in that moment, Ethan realized, so did he. By the time dawn broke over Manhattan, Jack was resting in a clean hospital bed, his fever under control. The monitors blinked steadily, and a soft oxygen mask covered his face. Emma sat by his side, her hand on his chest, as if holding him in place with sheer will. Ethan watched from the doorway, his heart unexpectedly heavy. When he had walked away from the world of gala dinners and billion-dollar deals just days ago, he hadn't expected this. Not the ache in his chest. Not the fierce protectiveness he now felt for two children who had once been strangers. Later that morning, after Jack had fallen into a deeper, healing sleep, Ethan offered Emma a warm meal and a place to rest. "You can come home with me," he said gently. "Just for now, until Jack gets stronger." Emma looked at him with the suspicion of someone who'd learned too early that kindness often came with a price. "You won't call child services?" "Not unless you want me to," he promised. She nodded slowly, exhausted but willing to trust him, at least for now. Back at the penthouse, Ethan prepared one of the guest rooms. The California king-sized bed looked comically large next to Emma's tiny frame and Jack's curled-up body. But after a hot bath and a bowl of soup, both children fell asleep nestled together beneath thick quilts. Mrs. Harris, the longtime housekeeper, returned the next day and was surprised, but not unkind, when she found Ethan at the stove making grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. "These kids," she said, peering into the bedroom, "they're changing you." Ethan just nodded, unable to explain it even to himself. But as the days passed, a new kind of rhythm emerged in his home, one filled with soft footsteps, cartoons playing in the background, and laughter that echoed through the once silent walls. Still, he knew the situation wasn't sustainable, not legally. Emma and Jack needed more than warmth and food. They needed protection. And so, one afternoon while the children were napping, Ethan made a call to Robert Harmon, the family's longtime attorney. "I need to know my options," he said. "They're not safe on the streets, and I won't let them go back." Harmon's response was careful. "Technically, Mr. Walker, taking them in without notifying the authorities could raise legal concerns. But if you're serious, we can file for temporary guardianship while we investigate their family background." Ethan agreed without hesitation. "I don't want to cut corners. I want to do this the right way, for them." He ended the call with a new resolve. It wasn't just about offering a warm bed anymore. It was about giving Emma and Jack a real home, and protecting the only family he'd come to care about in a very long time. That night, after tucking the children in, Ethan stood on the balcony, the city sprawling out before him. For the first time in years, the view didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something true. The courtroom was quiet, save for the ticking of an old wall clock and the gentle hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Ethan Walker sat on one side of the bench in a navy suit, his usual air of corporate control softened by the small hand gripping his. Emma sat beside him, dressed in a neatly pressed navy dress that Mrs. Harris had picked out. Jack sat on the other side, doodling quietly on a clipboard with a blue marker, unaware of the significance of the day. The guardianship hearing had begun. Judge Holloway, a graying man with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for fairness, glanced down at the stack of documents before him. He'd read glowing reports from the social worker, letters from Gordon the baker, and medical records detailing how Jack had recovered thanks to Ethan's intervention. But this wasn't just about paperwork. It was about what kind of future Ethan could give these children, and whether it would be enough. "Mr. Walker," the judge said, "you've made substantial changes to your life to care for these children. Why?" Ethan looked at Emma, then at Jack, before turning to the judge. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed emotion. "Because they changed me first," he said. "I used to think success was measured in numbers. But now, it's measured in laughter, safety, trust. These kids gave my life meaning. All I want is to keep them safe, to give them a home." Emma squeezed his hand, her small voice rising in the quiet room. "We want to stay with him, Your Honor." There was a pause. Even Judge Holloway seemed to blink away emotion before speaking. "This court finds sufficient grounds to grant permanent guardianship of Emma and Jack Miller to Mr. Ethan Walker, effective immediately." A breath Ethan hadn't realized he was holding finally released. Emma leaned into his side. Jack didn't fully understand, but smiled when he saw his sister smile. After the hearing, Gordon threw them a small celebration at the bakery. Cookies, balloons, paper crowns from the dollar store. It wasn't lavish, but it was full of love. That evening, back at the penthouse, the three of them curled up on the couch watching an old black and white Christmas movie. Emma rested her head on Ethan's shoulder while Jack, already in his pajamas, dozed off with a half-eaten graham cracker in hand. "Are we a real family now?" Emma whispered. Ethan looked down at her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We've been a family from the moment you handed back that wallet." She smiled. "Even if I took a little for bread?" He chuckled. "Especially because of that." Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars. But inside that home, something brighter had taken root, a quiet, enduring sense of belonging. Ethan no longer wondered what his life was missing. He was living it now, every single day, with a little girl, a little boy, and a promise he intended to keep for the rest of his life. At its heart, the story of Ethan, Emma, and Jack is not just about a wealthy man and two homeless children, it's about rediscovery, redemption, and the enduring power of human connection. For older adults, who have witnessed life's many seasons, this story reminds us of the values that truly stand the test of time. Integrity, even in the smallest moments, matters. Emma, just 5 years old, could have kept that wallet full of cash, but instead, she took only what she needed to feed her brother and left a handwritten note promising to pay it back. That simple act of honesty, done in silence and without expectation, set off a chain of events that changed all their lives. It's a reminder that doing the right thing, even when no one is watching, still carries great power in today's world. Loneliness doesn't discriminate. Ethan had all the money anyone could ever want, but no meaningful connections. It took the courage and innocence of 2 children to wake him up to what truly mattered. In a society that often praises self-sufficiency and success, we must also remember that purpose and belonging are essential to well-being, especially in the later stages of life. The story also highlights the importance of second chances. Both Ethan and the children's father, Ryan, made mistakes or missed opportunities. But neither was beyond redemption. As we age, we may carry regrets or wonder if it's too late to mend relationships or start anew. This story shows us that as long as there is willingness, healing is possible. Bridges can be rebuilt. Lastly, it reminds us that family isn't always about blood, it's about love, loyalty, and showing up when it matters. Whether through mentoring, grandparenting, or simply offering a helping hand, older adults have the power to shape the next generation with wisdom and compassion. In the end, what we leave behind isn't our bank balance or accolades, it's the kindness we extend, the love we give, and the lives we touch. And sometimes, it all begins with something as small as a lost wallet, and a child who chose to do the right thing.